Enjoy your meeting.
Preparing to record here. We've got Tom Batag. I think
Just
Tom
a reminder, today's meeting is being recorded.
I always have to do that. I think Tom is still in San Francisco, and Robert, you're in Washington, D.C. right now, getting ready to go to Iowa?
That's right. I'm going to Iowa tomorrow. Steve King, the conservative congressman, is having a big summit. So I'll be seeing all those guys give their speeches in the early part of 2016. It's kind of kicking off.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start recording this, but I'm going to turn the webcam around so you can try to see the students. But one thing I'd like for the students to do, I know everybody's got their laptops, and I've told you to bring your laptops in, but I read an article today on note-taking today, and I ran it by Tom. What I'd really like to do, so you can kind of give me some feedback as well, is if we can take physical notes. And while you're taking your notes, ask some questions, and then turn that in after the lecture today. That way it gives me an idea of how this has gone over, and then any questions you might have that we can address down the road. So I really appreciate that. But really the gist of the article is that people are comprehending more when they're actually physically writing it out as opposed to typing. I go back and forth, so we'll try it and get your thoughts on it as well. So I'd like to introduce Tom Batag once again, who is going to introduce our first guest lecturer of the day, Robert Costa. And so, Tom, if you can, introduce Robert.
Okay. I told you about Robert last class. This is the case of a person who came out of Notre Dame and was a truly talented writer and reporter, and immediately started writing great stories, and very quickly has become one of the important political reporters for the Washington Post. I hope you all read the one article that we assigned. If you read that, you know everything that you need to know. It's a great piece of work, and the goal today is to have Robert talk to you about somebody who made the decision to go into print when lots of you are saying, well, but what about my parents saying newspapers are dying? So with all of that, Robert, take off, and the goal here is for all of you to drive this discussion with your questions, and you're going to be graded on how much you participate on this. So Robert will kick it off, and then you guys jump in.
Well,
okay, Robert.
Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks, Len. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. It's great to connect with some students, fellow Notre Damers. I work at the Washington Post. I cover national politics. I've been at the Post for about a year. I cover Congress and I cover national campaigns. And I think that's a great mix because Congress is a place where, as a reporter, you can go up to a member of Congress and put a microphone or a recorder in their face and ask them a question and not have to go through a press secretary or a flack. And that's a rare thing these days, whether you cover Hollywood or a school board or Congress. Congress is a place where you can actually have an interview with a principal figure in the news. So that's what I really love about that. And as I said, I'm going to Iowa tomorrow to start the beginning of 2016. Covering a presidential campaign is great. I'd recommend it to anyone who loves reporting and politics because it's just a colorful scene, whether you're covering Secretary Clinton or you're covering some of the minor candidates on the Republican side or Jeb Bush and Mitt Romney. Now, before I came to the Washington Post, I was at National Review magazine, which is right of center, covers Republican politics, conservative movement, and I was a reporter there for about 4.5 years and then ran the Washington Bureau. Graduated from Notre Dame in 2008, got a master's degree from Cambridge in 2009. So anyway, I work at the Washington Post. I'd be happy to hear your thoughts or questions on reporting or politics. But I think this is an exciting time for journalism. I think anyone who's nervous about going into journalism, I think it's more reflective of nerves about the economy at large, because I think journalism right now is a vibrant place to work. If you love video, writing, being part of the moment, it's really great for people of our generation who are in their 20s, who know how to use social media, who know how to write quickly, and who are tuned to what people want as consumers. I don't want to ramble on too long, so happy to take any questions. We'll keep it lively as possible.
Well, Robert, talk a little bit about coming out of Notre Dame and then getting your master's. How you got your first job, why you wanted to go that direction.
Well, I started out when I was 16. Just to give you, some people say, "Well, how have you done all these things in a few years?" Well, I started when I was 16 as a reporter in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, at a paper called the Bucks County Courier-Times. I started as a music critic covering rock concerts, and the reason I was a music critic, it's kind of shallow, but it's funny, is the record companies would give me 2 tickets to go cover a concert. The paper would pay me $50 to write a review, so I could make some money and take a girl out on a date. So that's why I got into journalism, and so that kind of led to doing it at college. I worked at the Observer briefly, but the funny thing was about the Observer is I was never kind of an insider at the Observer. I don't know, maybe it was just it just wasn't my thing when I was in college. It was hard to kind of get in there. I used to write music reviews for the scene section, and I had some tough times with the scene section. Sometimes they would say, "Oh, we're not going to publish this. It's too negative, or it's too positive, or I don't know." So anyway, I went after having some struggles with the Observer. I went to Notre Dame TV, which at the time was very fledgling and just not really organized, and I started to host my own show there, which was like Wayne's World, called Office Hours, and it was just basically me interviewing people who were interesting on campus. Like one of the greatest things I did at Notre Dame that people forget about, but I consider it a feather in the cap, is if you like, Dave Matthews is someone who I've always liked when I was growing up, still do. And Tim Reynolds is a guitarist who's played with Dave Matthews for years. And I brought Tim Reynolds to play at Notre Dame. I did a feature interview with him for an hour. He played in the studio. So part of journalism is having guts about really just not caring about the rules at Notre Dame or who says what you can do, and just going and doing it and asking people to help out with an interview or to give their time. So I did NDTV. And I think internships are so critical. I spent a semester at ABC News in Washington, and it was kind of a thrill last week. So in the fall of 2006, I was at Notre Dame. I was an intern for This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I had a great time. But one of the most vivid memories I have of being at ABC News was I was in the green room, which is where they have the holding area for the guests, and I was asked to go display the donuts and the croissants that they had for the senators and congressmen who were on the show. And so I went to the donut shop down the street in D.C., and I got a box, and just being the guy I am, as you can tell, I just threw the box of donuts on the table and just left. And I got screamed at for not being professional and not understanding that the donuts need to be individually displayed and all this. And it was kind of a wake-up moment for me. It sounds small, but I realized to be in television news or to be in major national journalism, you got to pay attention to the small things. Because I was just kind of a too casual student. But long story short, 2 weeks ago, I was in that same green room again that I got in trouble in as an intern as a guest. And that was a kind of surreal moment to be a guest in a show I used to intern for. And another internship I did in college. Yeah, sorry.
I said, how were the donuts? Were the donuts displayed?
ABC's got an amazing spread. They have a full gourmet. It's exactly like Out of This Town, the Mark Leibovich book, or it's everything that's wrong with Washington. But it was great. And then the other person I interned for in college was Charlie Rose, which was great, the PBS host. And he and I are still friends, and I've been on his show 10 times in the last year. So it's been a fun run. But the thing is, after college, to answer the actual question, instead of going to be an intern at like CBS, I decided to take a job with National Review because it was a real full-time reporting job. And so the point I have in sharing that is I felt at the time there were not many opportunities in 2009 when I was coming out of my master's degree to work as a journalist. And I wasn't exactly dying to work at a conservative magazine, though I have deep respect for National Review. So you kind of got to roll with what you get and make the best of it, because I think a lot of people who get into journalism just kind of they get frustrated that they can't get immediately what they want. But journalism is such high turnover. It's a place where you can easily move between jobs if something isn't to your liking. And so if the first job isn't perfect, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Too many people get tense about that kind of thing, and just realize you can move.
Hey, Robert, this is Len. I'm going to ask a question, then we're going to open it up to the rest of the class. But this is multimedia journalism, and so they're going to get a taste of a little bit of everything. And right now, they're in the print element. They've written their obituary as an introduction to the class to kind of give us an idea of what they want to do with their lives. But they've got an assignment next week. It's an op-ed piece. So could you talk about writing itself, what they could do to really hone their writing skills and to become a better communicator in the print form?
Well, the thing about writing is I don't even consider myself a writer. I've had to really get better at writing. And the only way to get better at writing is to keep writing and keep reading. Too many people, I think, don't read enough because you always want to read how other writers are phrasing sentences. And when you start reading the Washington Post or the New York Times or Rolling Stone or whatever you're reading, you want to pay attention to the way sentences flow together and how the quality of excellence is something that you develop over time, but it's not something that's like magic. You can really acquire it. And what I mean by that is too many people, I think, bad writing is when you repeat words. If you say Notre Dame had a fantastic effort today on the field and the effort was part of the coach's game plan, you don't want to use effort twice. And you also want to find a way to have sentences that have flow. And that just kind of gets ingrained in you over time as you read and write. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to be colorful and have a real voice in your writing. That doesn't mean you need to be shrill or over the top in your tone. But I think the worst writing is writing that's deliberately dry. And that if you're at Notre Dame, if you have any intellect at all, which you obviously do, and a lot of people do, they somehow seem to water down their writing. And I think your writing should be as smart and as colorful as you are as a person, and not think there needs to be a certain form. Being professional does not mean being boring. And I think you got to always remember that. Am I giving the reader and myself the best effort I can to really present what I see, what I smell, the way someone moved their hand at an event, the way something was inflected, the way the crowd responded? That's what you want to capture. When you read the great essays in Sports Illustrated or in the New York Times, it's really they're capturing the scene rather than just telling you in a rat-tat-tat fashion what happened.
Now, this is also an industry where it's about networking, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to Robert Costa. He's had internships with Charlie Rose and ABC, and here's a chance to kind of position yourself. So let's open it up to you to ask questions, and I'll kind of point the camera at you. So go ahead and introduce yourself to Robert.
Hi, Robert. I'm Rebecca Rogalski. I had a question specifically about networking, especially about your internship with ABC News in Washington. How did you go about getting this internship? I mean, did you have contacts who you talked to, or did you just kind of email around? What did you end up doing?
Good question. It's good to meet you. I think the key so we live in an age of all email all the time. And so you want to, find the right email address of the point of contact within an organization. You want to connect with an actual person. Just emailing a generic internship coordinator or generic info@company.com is not usually going to get you in the pool where you want to swim. So find the email. And that's going to take Googling. It's going to maybe take asking a friend or the Career Center. But it's really going to take your own initiative. Can you just have enough savvy in the way you search on Google and other ways to use quotations, to use the website name to try to find the right contact? And the other thing is the phone. And I think the phone is one of the most underrated tools. Get yourself on the phone with a coordinator, with a representative of the company, with a reporter there. Oftentimes reporters at organizations will have their emails be publicly accessible. But try to have a casual phone interview, phone call where sometimes you're just checking in and you're introducing yourself. But you want to get on the radar of people who you're interested in working in. Do it in a brief, professional, upbeat fashion and follow up with an email. Because a lot of times in journalism especially, there's a lot going on every day. As long as people know you're on their radar, they'll know how to search through their email and find you if something comes up. And so you just want to be in that space so people know how to discover you. And I think really being professional in your email writing is so key, because so many people who are so smart academically and have great qualities, I've seen them ruin themselves by not being professional in email, by having spelling errors, by having run-on sentences, by not having their phone number, by having a resume that looks like it's bad. And those are the things that are so easy to fix. So it's such an unnecessary thing to hurt yourself. And the other thing is, be positive. A lot of people are really negative. They sound desperate. I mean, finding jobs like dating, like people who are negative and sound desperate, it puts people off. So don't be like that in exchanges. And also look for innovative companies. Everyone sometimes goes to New York Times, Washington Post, CBS, ABC, NBC, and then they just stop. But look, who are the hot companies? Who are the people who really have a niche? Like Charlie Rose, for example. Most people weren't trying to intern for Charlie Rose at PBS, but it was one of the greatest career opportunities I ever had for the quality of his guests, and they were looking for interns because most people, that Charlie Rose wasn't part of the whole national media scene in a way that most college students knew. So try to find people like that if you're not immediately getting the internships you want. I mean, the funny thing is, I told you I was just on This Week after being a This Week intern. I was dying to be on Meet the Press as an intern, but I got rejected. And you just go to something else. When I was I did a fellowship at the Wall Street Journal. I was rejected twice from it. Applied again, got it. And so it's perseverance is a cliche, but I think it rings true.
So, Robert, a connection through Notre Dame and this class, if they would like to contact you, is that a possibility for additional advice down the road?
Yeah, so my email is very easy. It's robert.costa@washpost.com. And if you ever need a call, my number is 917-991-8398. But especially if you're in D.C., you want to see the Washington Post, if you want to go to a taping of Hardball or something, or just talk about careers, I'm happy to help.
Could you repeat your email again? You were cutting out just a little bit.
Sure, it's robert.costa, my name, robert.costa@washpost.com.
Okay, additional questions? Go ahead, Jeff, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Agar. I'm a junior marketing and journalism student here. And I had a question specifically about social media and kind of the role that plays in your reporting, especially because so much on Capitol Hill and Congress happens like by the minute. So what kind of role does social media play? And obviously it plays a role, and kind of the standard of writing or the standard of reporting, does that change at all? Because obviously things have to happen a little quicker. Is there kind of a way you balance that?
It's a great question. Social media has been integral to my career so far. I have something like 67,000 Twitter followers, and it's all because of the way I use Twitter. It's not because I'm like a popular presence. It's because I use it as a reporting tool, and people use Twitter as a real news source. It's become the new news wire. And the way I look at Twitter is the notebook. So if you put something in your notebook as a reporter, it has to be accurate. It's what you've seen and heard, and it's something you're going to use in a future article. But instead of keeping that notebook private now, I'm happy to share it with my readers. Because if I know something's right, and I've seen it with my own eyes or been told it, and it's accurate, I'm happy to run with it in an article, and I'm also happy to run with it on Twitter. And that has enabled me, whether I'm covering the shutdown, whether I'm covering a campaign, and it's Instagram as well, Twitter, YouTube videos, to really capture the moment. And people who follow politics moment by moment, as you said, they want to be fed new information. They want to learn what's happening, and there is an appetite for it. And I know there was a lot of reluctance about Twitter among political journalists for a while. They thought it was a distraction, and you certainly don't want to overdo it. You don't want to only be on Twitter. You want to write articles as well as substance. But Twitter, if you're not in the mix, here's the thing. Twitter tomorrow could start to fade as a news source and as a way of communicating. But wherever you're in, especially in journalism, but any industry, be there now. Be in the times you live in. The old people around me who don't go on Twitter, they're only hurting themselves. And as for me, I'm always keeping an eye out for what's next. How do I better use Instagram? How do I better use new tools? You want to really try to be with the readers, be what's hot. Instead of being so judgmental about social media, just use it as a tool for yourself professionally and editorially.
Madison? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a sophomore. So I was just wondering, like, how you got into political writing, because I know that you did do a lot of political writing, like, starting out, I guess, like, in college and stuff like that. So I was just wondering how you got into that.
So I always loved politics. Yeah. What's that? Oh, sorry. I thought you said something else. I always loved politics. I always loved history. And I feel political journalism is a great way to really kind of cover national things early on in your career, or state issues or state matters. And politics, it's always changing. The personalities are great. And so I originally thought I was going to try to be a music critic or maybe go do something in TV. But political journalism, it was considered serious, and it wasn't. And that meant something to me. I didn't want to be covering just frivolous stuff. Like I had some offers from companies to write memes and blogs, and those could have been fun jobs. But I just wanted to do something a little more substantive. And in politics, the players are always changing. It demands that you stay up with the news. And I like to hustle. I like to compete. And political journalism really enables you to have valuable scoops. If you get a scoop in political journalism about some bill being passed or someone being picked for a position or some campaign making a major change, people pay attention to that in a big way in political journalism. And so that kind of met my personality. And I've always said, though, as much as I love political journalism, I'm not totally committed to doing this for life. I mean, I love sports journalism. I love music journalism. I've done that a lot in the past. And so I think the great thing about journalism is that you're not totally tied into, like a lawyer would be or a doctor, into a specific part of your field. It really gives you breadth to move around. I've seen people at the Washington Post go from covering national politics to going to be war correspondents, to going to run the Washington Post China Bureau, or to go be a Midwest correspondent. And I've seen others go from being at the Washington Post to go run their own website and to do something on their own. And so that flexibility is appealing. But I do love politics, and that's just, you got to be who you are in some ways. I mean, if you love something and you can get paid to do it, usually you'll have some success, because it's not like a chore every day to wake up and do it.
I'm Katie Apollo. I'm a junior. I'm from Northampton County, so I'm close to Bucks County, where you used to live. And
oh, great.
I was just wondering if it gets hard, because like you said, to always have a voice in your writing, but does it get hard, especially with political writing, to not show your opinion as much? Because I know like a lot of political writing has to be unbiased, and is that a problem? Like, do you find that difficult when you're writing articles?
No, you got to be certainly careful if you want to protect your brand as an objective reporter. You really have to make sure you're not giving opinions. But I think when you think about how to write in a vivid, colorful way, which will set you apart, you want to think about how to be descriptive rather than being partisan, and how best can you explain and tell a story. And that should animate you, whether you're producing something for Nightline or you're writing an article. What is going to really give the story life? The hardest thing about opinions, though, is I'm often on TV to weigh in on political events. I'm going to be on Chris. If you're watching MSNBC tonight, I am going to change, and I am going to be talking Romney and Bush at 8 o'clock Eastern. I don't know what time it airs. Chris Hayes on MSNBC. But tonight they're going to be asking me about Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush. And you know, the easy thing is to offer an opinion and say, oh, Romney's pathetic, he's trying to run for a third time. But you don't want to burn your Romney sources. You don't want to sound like a jerk. And so I always avoid that, and I just tell what's happening, what I know, and just kind of know when to stop talking too. And too often people run on and on and on, and that's when they start giving opinions. Having discipline, not only what you write, but what you say, is something that you develop over time, and it also protects you professionally.
Thank you.
Bridget, you're writing heavily down there. I imagine you got something on your mind, too.
Hi, I'm Bridget Galaspini. I actually took a class at the Post last spring with Lozada. It was awesome. And I guess
He's a great guy.
Yeah, awesome. With the necessity to be active on Twitter and get all the news out as fast as possible, how do you balance that with making sure your sources are accurate, like, and not saying you're not presenting like wrong facts? I just think that would be a hard balance.
Well, it's the key, and you really have to learn to trust your sources, but also learn which sources to trust, and to err on the side of caution, because the way I view this journalism stuff is a long race, and in a long race, you don't want to just constantly be sprinting to this thing or that thing just because it offers a momentary lift. You want to be steady, and you want to make sure you're always in a position to either move up in the organization or move on to a higher place and to keep building. And that takes integrity, and it also takes judgment about your sourcing. An example is in 2012, 2 weeks before the announcement, I got a tip from a serious national figure that Paul Ryan is going to be the vice presidential nominee. And he said, it's done deal. Ryan's the pick. And scooping everyone on the vice presidential pick is a career maker. And so I was very tempted to run with this. But not one other person would confirm it for me, and it was very hard to corroborate. So I made the decision uneasily, and my editors were not happy with it, to not run with it. And so I didn't get the Romney-Ryan scoop, but I was saying up until the moment it was announced that it was likely to be Ryan, and that everything I was hearing from my top sources that it was Ryan, but I never reported that the pick is Ryan. And that was the kind of nuance I chose to go with, because I didn't have it nailed that it was Ryan for VP, but I had it solid. And so you really need to learn about how you phrase things in the leads of your articles. How good do you really have something? And the other thing is about sourcing, especially if you go into political journalism, but if you cover business or if you cover anything that has drama or consequence, most people are going to try to either go on background or go on the record. Some of the key to great reporting is pushing people to go on the record, because background and off-the-record reporting has so much less weight than someone who puts their name alongside of it. And a great example of this recently, in that Battle of the Senate piece, if you read it, David Crone, Harry Reid's chief of staff, who never gives interviews, went on the record with the Washington Post to talk about private meetings with the President of the United States in a negative fashion. It was a blockbuster in D.C. because that's such a rare thing, but it's because we pushed. We didn't want to have this sniping behind the scenes, it's BS, to always have, according to a senior administration official. And we said, we're not going to even, you can learn to be professional with people, but tough. And we said to a lot of people in that article, and still do in every article, we're not going to deal with you in this story if you're going to be bickering in the background. And what happens is you'll initially get a lot of pushback. People will say, oh, we're going to go to another outlet. We're going to give this to someone else. Okay. You shrug. My point is, at the end of the day, in reporting and mostly in life, if you're not a pushover and you show a little mettle, it actually pays off, because people don't want to deal with a pushover. With the big stories I've scooped, and I've scooped a few in the last few years, it's because people trusted that I wasn't going to be manipulated by them. They knew they would have someone solid to go to with a solid piece of information.
Tom?
Go one more line on why Crone was willing to go on the record, which was talk about scoops.
Yeah. So Crone was, he's an interesting guy. He's married to Alistair Master Monaco, who was President Obama's chief executive assistant for the first 3 or 4 years at the White House. And he is one of the most hard-charging guys. He and Harry Reid, is a former boxer. They have similar personalities. But they were so frustrated with the president for not giving money to Senate Democrats in a tough election year. They didn't think the president was engaged. And this was a chorus I and my colleagues have been hearing all year, that the president just wasn't politically attuned to the problems happening in the Democratic campaigns. And once you kept hearing this as a reporter, it just informed you, and we would report it out. But eventually we sat down with Crone, and I had here's how I got Crone to do it. One of the things I kept hearing about David Crone was that he'll never talk to you, he'll never talk to you. Okay, I said. But I also heard that the man took meticulous notes. And the kind of person who takes meticulous notes often wants to share those notes, and whether they're going to write them in a book or they're going to leak it to a reporter. So I just suspected that Crone, if approached in a certain way, would be willing to talk. And so we agreed to talk on background with the openness of going on the record when we met with him. And then we met with him on a Sunday, which was also a smart move because no one was at the Capitol. You often want to get your source, if you can, in an area where they're comfortable, where there's not a lot of people around, where it just feels like it's a comfort zone for you guys to have a conversation, whether you're on TV or whether you're doing it in print. And so we got Crone in a comfortable setting. It was the right time. We had done all the legwork, and he knew we weren't gonna mess around with him. So it just worked. And sometimes that's a break, but you got to work toward breaks, and they will come if you just lay the groundwork. But you got to be aggressive and professional at the same time. It's a hard balance because you don't want to be a pushover and too nice, but you also don't want to be someone they can just shut out. It's a balance you got to strike every day as a reporter.
Tom, anything else you'd like to contribute?
No, keep the class keep going. You're doing great.
Bridget?
How did you get so well first? Like, what was your first step in the beginning? Was it really just putting a microphone by someone else at the Capitol, or because I feel like you know a lot of people?
Was the question, how do I get well sourced?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way I started was covering Congress, and one thing I noticed early on was a lot of reporters, to put it bluntly, were lazy. They would show up, write the story of the day, and go home. You have to get to know your sources as people, and you have to look at relationships. It sounds like it's transactional, but okay, it is. But it's also, you got to get to know your sources as people. Where do they hang out? I got to know Speaker Boehner because I used to go. He has breakfast every day at a place called Pete's Diner on Capitol Hill, and and I always wonder, why does Boehner do this? Well, he grew up in a tavern in Cincinnati. He likes the blue-collar vibe of the place, and he often has breakfast alone, which tells you something about Boehner. He wakes up every day at 6, goes to breakfast at 6:30 at Pete's, has breakfast alone at one of the worst breakfast joints on Capitol Hill, walks to church every day, and then goes to work, all before most of his staffers are even up. And so all the people who think Boehner, he maybe drinks too much, or maybe he's not that he's with it, that's a surface judgment. Boehner is a complicated person. So I used to go to Pete's Diner and just, in a professional but / aggressive way, sit next to him, and I would wear the Notre Dame jacket. My parents got me the Rudy jacket when I graduated, it's too ostentatious to wear around most of the time. It's like you don't want to be that guy. But I did wear it. You know, like I didn't play football, and anyway, so I would wear the jacket though to Pete's Diner. And Boehner, he played for Jerry Faust when he was at Muller High School in Cincinnati. And so Boehner, I knew he went to Muller. I knew Faust. I interviewed Faust when Boehner got elected speaker. Boehner loves talking Notre Dame. He's a Catholic. He loves he loves all that. And so he knew who I was. I was never hiding. I was a reporter. But over the years, we've established a relationship, reporter to source. That has been very valuable to me. And also just paying attention to where congressmen come in and out. I know when Eric Cantor lost, I was the only one to get an interview with him because I always knew he came in a secret door in the back. It's just, none of this stuff is hard. Sourcing, people always wonder, like, how does Costa get all these things? You just got to kind of be there. And you also have to learn to speak to politicians, or if you're speaking to any source, at their level. And I don't want to overdo this, but like most reporters on Capitol Hill, I think, miss the whole boat because they talk to politicians like they're a prosecutor. And that's not how these guys are going to give you any kind of candid answer. You never want to be too friendly with them, but you got to speak the language of politicians, understand how your sources speak. I think Andrew Ross Sorkin at CNBC, who wrote the Too Big to Fail, the way he reports on Wall Street, it's the same way I kind of report on Congress, is really get to know the players and be inside the room as much as possible, whether they're telling you or you're actually there. And that demands that you don't have to just always be like you're speaking to a wall. Speak to them as people. Remember their spouse's names. You almost got to be a politician yourself. Remember who they are, where they come from, where they went to college, who they played football for in high school. Because all that feeds into them remembering at a crucial moment when they have something to share. I like that Costa, or I like that whoever.
Jacob, you're taking notes, and it says, buy the Rudy jacket. He did. He wrote that down. I saw him. You got a question?
I have another question right now.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
I have one.
Yeah, Lena, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name's Lena Madison. I'm a junior here. American Studies and a Spanish major is double. My question is, what did Notre Dame teach you about ethical reporting? And I mean, Notre Dame's a place where, you know, a lot of people call it exceptional, but do you feel like you brought that into the real world with you, like that exceptional feel that we're supposed to have?
Totally. I mean, Notre Dame did a lot for me in two ways to answer that question. One, I was amazed when I came to Notre Dame. Like in high school, I was very busy. I booked John Mayer to play at my prom. I interviewed Dave Matthews, the Grateful Dead. I was doing a ton of crazy stuff in high school. There's actually a book written about my high school career, nonfiction, crazy. It's called Wonderland. And so I got to Notre Dame, and I was surprised at like how low-key everyone was. And I'd went to a huge public high school in Philadelphia, suburbs, and everyone at Notre Dame was just kind of like, we don't do things like that here. And I was like, okay. And so my point is, like at Notre Dame, I got to know Father Jenkins really well, and I interviewed Father Jenkins on Notre Dame TV like 5 or 6 times, like extensive hour-long interviews. And I was always shocked. Jenkins, like, no one ever asked me for interviews. Like the Observer would like maybe put in a request but not really follow through, and no one else was really pursuing him for interviews. And so I would just sit down with Jenkins all the time on TV and talk through things, and he loved it. But I just couldn't. I was amazed that like no one was talking to the president of the university. And so I brought a lot of other people to NDTV, and I think what Notre Dame taught me though is that you can be you can be aggressive and you can really build relationships, and it was really easy to do that at Notre Dame with some great people. Now I'm on the board of trustees at Notre Dame. It's crazy. Next week I'm going to Naples to hang out with Jenkins and the board. It's like, what a whirlwind. But Notre Dame has seriously, it's true. But it is weird. But the thing is, Notre Dame though has a certain quality of people that I think and use the Notre Dame network. Notre Dame is the best people I know in DC who are part of Notre Dame family community. Is they really know how to stay in touch with people, and Notre Dame does a really good job at that. And I also think Notre Dame take advantage of Notre Dame. I went to study abroad in London with Notre Dame. I did the Washington semester with Notre Dame. It just has great opportunities. And Bob Schmuel, I know some of you know. I got to know him personally and just pick his brain, just like you could pick the brain of Tom or Bob Schmuel or anyone. I think Notre Dame is just a wealth of riches. The question is, do you have the interest and the savvy to find out actually the wealth of those riches and to find out new people you could, like I would challenge you if you were a junior or senior now to really scour through the faculty bios of people in your department, outside of your department, maybe FTT, and really start to think to yourself, have I done even 1% of what I could to take advantage of what's actually at Notre Dame? And this is not a criticism. I feel like I try to do that all the time at Notre Dame. And I felt like so many people from Jenkins on down who I sat down with for coffee or an interview or a meeting, they said no one ever contacts them. I was just shocked at that. And so all these older people at Notre Dame are just dying to help out students. You just got to call them or email them.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Robert or Tom? I guess, Robert, a final question from me. This is a multimedia journalism class. Are we in an era where we still have a specialization where you're a print person, or do you incorporate elements of multimedia in your work?
Oh, I don't. No one does labels anymore. I mean, if you go into a job interview now and say, I want to be a print journalist, I want to be a video journalist, you'll get laughed out, I mean, politely. No one uses those terms anymore. You are a journalist. People are going to expect you to write. They're going to expect you to do video. They're going to expect you to tweet. They're going to expect you to Instagram. and they'll expect you to be able to communicate in all kinds of forums, whether it's a public event for your institution or elsewhere. But the thing I would emphasize is there's nothing more important than good writing. Because as much as we continue to build the media we use, writing in text is at the core of all of it almost. And if you can't write and you can't under pressure string together 300 or 400 words on a subject, even if you're aggregating, like a lot of your early jobs will be if you go into print or news, you need to know at the core how to write well. And so let's say you do go into video first, great. If you go to work for a television network, excellent. But the people who are going to excel there are those who can write professionally and succinctly and smartly in email, who can write great scripts, who know how to book guests because they can write well on solicitations. So just remember, like, always be reading, writing well, and that will lead to you speaking well, communicating well in social media, using social media in a fashion that gets you notice.
Any final questions for Robert? Robert, I'll just throw it back to you one time, just some final thoughts. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and we wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we'll see you tonight on television.
Yep, I will be there, 8 o'clock Eastern. So final thoughts would be, it's a great time to go into journalism. Just stay steady. So many people who are close friends of mine, whether they're journalists or not, have gotten very frustrated over the past 5 or 6 years, and you just got to realize that you have to pace yourself and not become frustrated if you're not doing everything you want that moment. And so many people I've seen in politics and journalism burned out because they just can't handle that the economy is not great or their job is not perfect. Just realize that I know it sounds simplistic, but don't burn out. You keep your health, keep your smarts about you, build your relationships. Remember, it's a long, long race. And just keep reading. Read the New York Times, the Washington Post every day. Challenge yourself to read those newspapers because no one will ever tell you these things. They're like the unwritten rules. But the people who are running your organizations are doing that every single day. And they're reading probably much more than you or I combined. And there's a reason they're there, not only because they're reading a lot, but it's because they're really attuned to what's happening. And just challenge yourself, one night a week maybe you don't go out and just try to write something out, write some emails, respond to people, and just stay steady, read, and don't get discouraged. Anyone who's discouraging is because they're having their own problems. You create your own destiny. Go Irish.
Great advice. Are you going to be on campus sometime this semester?
Yeah, I'll be on campus in April for, I think it's around the Blue Gold game for another board meeting, so I'll definitely be there.
Well, we do give you an open invite to meet with the students here, or if you can, make the class. We'd sure like to meet you in person, and once again, thank you for your time.
Happy to do it. Best of luck.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Good luck tonight.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you.
Okay, Tom, we do have another professional with us in the class, so I'm going to ask if Andrew can go to that side so Tom could actually see you. But when we read your obituaries, we saw there were a lot of individuals interested in sports here. And so you'll see throughout the semester we've got some people with sports background coming in because I come from a sports background. So when I was putting the syllabus for the class together, one of the first people I talked to was Andrew, because he sits next to me at the basketball games. And I said, hey, you were in that class, weren't you? And he goes, yeah, I was a graduate. So I said, here, take a look at the syllabus. And so he's been a great sounding board for me. But he's a recent graduate. He's been there to get the job, but he's also a great writer, and he's going to kind of encompass a little bit of everything. So I introduce you, my friend, my colleague, Andrew Owen.
Thanks for having me. As I said earlier, I graduated 2 years ago, so he showed me the class list, and I didn't really recognize anyone, so I guess I'm at the point where I'm getting old, in terms of graduating and stuff. But a little bit about me, I mentioned how I work for Blue and Gold Illustrated, which covers Notre Dame football primarily, and as well as basketball. And, kind of like what Robert said, I think it's a very exciting time of convergent media where for so long, print was the core of media, and obviously still is to an extent, but we're kind of in a transitional phase where things are moving from print to digital, and lots of questions in the industry. And that's kind of exciting because it's really like this generation, or this era, I should say, that gets to decide a lot of the ways of what direction we're going in. Because certainly you have groups that want only print, groups that want only digital. We have to find ways to reach out to both of them and also have an eye on the future. I pass around those magazines. We have a combination of 20,000 print and digital subscribers. So a lot of them, it's usually kind of an older age that likes the print magazine, and now we're trying to develop an iPad app that we have for our magazine for maybe younger viewers that like to read that way, that we incorporate a lot of multimedia aspects to. I'll pass this around if anyone wants to take a look. We like videos and we do podcasts and that sort of thing. But one of the things I like about working at Blue and Gold Illustrated is we have such a small staff that I'm able to get involved in all sorts of multimedia opportunities and learn how to, run a podcast and do a podcast, shoot video, edit video, post to the website. So in a lot of ways, we have like two halves of our company, if that makes sense, where we're on the Rivals.com network for anyone that's familiar with college athletics and everything, where we're serving web-only subscribers, but also print subscribers and ones that can access our app as we start to get that to be more of a polished product. So I think that's one of the things I really like. Now, the main point today, as Robert kind of mentioned, is you want to make yourself stand out, and I think that's true always from a publication standpoint and individual standpoint. There are, Notre Dame football being what it is, there's probably, I think, on a regular Brian Kelly Tuesday press conference, probably 40 reporters in the room. So, a lot of it's what makes you stand out, and a lot of those, it's not like we're a pay site. You have to pay $100 a year to be on our site, but a lot of them aren't. So what makes us special enough that you want to put down money to access our premium information? So we're constantly trying to figure out ways to set ourselves out from the competition. Digitally, when you have, let's say, 8 Notre Dame players come out on a Wednesday for interviews, and a swarm of reporters go to them, well, you're probably going to mostly have the same story from everyone. So what makes you different? Can you talk to his high school coach? Can you talk to maybe a parent? Is there a source that you can get in touch with, maybe make your story stand out? Because otherwise, you're just going to have, as someone at the LA Times once told me, that you're just going to have a bunch of hacks going after the same person writing the same boring story. So really that's the key thing, is making yourself stand out, making your publication stand out. And like Robert said, writing, it always comes down to writing. If you can't write, you're not going to be able to succeed in this industry. But at the same time, when you're presenting yourself, when looking for an internship, when looking for a job, what can you do that maybe another great applicant can't do? And it's funny because a few years ago, probably being able to do video or do podcasts, social media, that might be something that might have helped you a few years ago, but now it's like more of a detriment if you can't. It's expected of you that you're able to do it. So what ways can you say, hey, this is where I worked on such and such feed or at such and such place, and I stood up for my competition? In terms of looking for a job, just out of curiosity, how many of you guys are looking to do journalism as a career or just taking this class as an interest in it? For those interested in doing the career, I guess raise your hand. Okay, good. So I know a lot of times in journalism classes there are people that are interested in it and aren't really necessarily engaged yet with the idea of going into that field, but that's really exciting. And like Robert said, you control your destiny in a lot of ways, and if you work hard, you will set yourself apart from the competition, because there are a lot of people out there that are just okay with being average, okay with just doing the normal things, but the ones that stand out and the ones that are going to get the big stories or write the great stories are the ones that are willing to go an extra mile and to work the hardest. And in terms of what to do to set yourself up now for those kinds of positions, obviously Robert comes from an area where he didn't work at the Observer very long. It sounds like he did some with NDTV, but I would recommend certainly getting involved with one of the on-campus organizations, media organizations, and trying to get. It's not a be-all, end-all. If you're a junior or senior and you're not really involved with one of them, it doesn't mean your career is dead by any sense of the equation. But certainly try to get involved and figure out what you can do here on campus, because there are so many ways, whether you're looking into sports or news, that you can get involved and cover important stories and help set yourself apart. When my senior year, applying for an internship and got one with MLB.com to cover the San Francisco Giants, they said, this is one of our highest profile beats because they won 2 of the previous 3 World Series leading up to that year, and they said we wanted someone with high profile beat experience, and because I had covered Notre Dame, that helped me a lot. Compared to someone at another university, it's not like I did anything in that sense better than someone else, but my point is take advantage of what you have here at Notre Dame because there are a lot of great opportunities to get involved. Social media it's obviously changed the equation so much for what you have to do and what the responsibilities are. I mean, there's not an hour that passes where I don't go on it and monitor what happens because, the old days where a story would happen, you'd have the next day to write it for the newspaper or something or for a magazine. That's gone. Now, if you're not on Twitter for an hour, you happen to hop on and say, oh, such and such coach left, and, you're kind of screwed. You're playing behind the rest of the competition. So, there are certain ways, too, that you can use social media. Notice who people are interacting with, who they're following with, even on the football beat, as much as they try to protect that realm that you can notice and help in your reporting. So I'm happy to be here, and I don't know if anyone wants to ask questions or if any of the presentations didn't make sense.
I had a question about, I know Robert talked about it too, like building a rapport with the people you cover. Is that kind of the same idea in sports, or is it even more so in sports?
It's very interesting, especially here if you were covering, let's say, Northwestern football or something. Here, there just are always so many reporters swarming around, and the way they typically do it is we get to talk to players once during the week, like on a Wednesday evening. So you might, they bring out, like, let's say 6 players. Well, you're not going to get many one-on-ones necessarily, but after people come over and ask a few questions about the big thing, that person is coming off of, and they go to the next person. Well, a lot of times that's the best time to just sit down next to that person and just talk with them. Not necessarily for your story, but just so that they remember you, you remember them. Hey, what's your number? What's your parents' number? I'd love to get in touch with them for a story or something. And they'll remember that in a lot of ways, as opposed to when there's 10 people standing around them asking them the same questions, shooting for the same story. So much of it in this day and age is protected in terms of you can't just, like, they decide who comes out and they decide here's when Brian Kelly will come out, that sort of thing. But that, it's a challenge, but at the same time, it also lets you, if you work hard enough and if you're creative enough, to stand out from everyone else if you're willing to go the extra mile.
It's kind of like a 3-ring circus without a ringleader. And I think Andrew brought up a great point, is that he's actually working with one hand tied behind his back because UND.com has full access. You're limited on how much you can do as far as multimedia.
Absolutely. It's kind of frustrating sometimes because, let's say, during fall practice or whatever it might be, they might have video of the practice, they might talk to coordinators who we get to talk to twice a year. They have all this access, but, that makes it harder for us, but at the same time, it's kind of an exciting challenge because we have to turn around and figure out how to, get that sort of information, because when we have subscribers that are paying $100 a year or $10 a month, depending on what plan they're doing, that are demanding info and demanding, why is my subscription important? Why should I be paying this? That drives you to try to break those kind of stories and to kind of look beyond what the department itself is putting out.
Now, is it 2 minutes for video? That's what we can use?
3.
3 minutes.
3.
That means when we go to a Brian Kelly press conference, if you're not part of the university media, you can only use 3 minutes, where UND.com can run 30. And so it's really a challenge because, as he said, he's asking people to spend $100 a year, but they can go to UND.com for free and get more content. So, any questions?
Yeah.
Follow that. Was that different when you're covering the Giants then? Did it find it to be a little easier in professional sports?
Yeah, it was interesting because the way they do access, let's say it's a 7 o'clock game at 3:30, the clubhouse opens. You can talk to whoever you like for an hour and a half. Now, a lot of times players will avoid it and they'll stay in the training room where it's off limits to reporters. They'll hang out there for a bit. because they want to talk to you, but there are no limits on who you can talk to. You can, there's access with the manager before the game, and then after the game, the clubhouse opens up again. You can talk to any of the players, talk to the manager. If you need to grab like a hitting coach or something, you can grab him. So I do kind of miss how open that access was, because that was really nice for a summer. But at the same time, you know, they're giving, you know, if you give some and take some, and I really like the balance of covering college football as opposed to Major League Baseball.
I know the last